I'm James Beckwith, President and CEO of Five Star Bank. As a community bank, we believe that open dialogue about the issues affecting our region is vitally important. From the economy to the environment to social issues, we look forward to the conversations and hope you'll join in.
Welcome to Studio Sacramento. I'm your host, Scott Syfax. Let's face it, finding a job is tough and the unemployment rate remains high in the valley. How do we recover from this economic slump and how do we get people back to work? That's what we're talking about on Studio Sacramento, creating new businesses in the valley. Joining me today, Tracy Shaw, Vice President of Strategic Marketing at SACTO, Ryan Sharp, Director of the Center for Strategic Economic Research, and Jack Crawford, Venture Capitalist, Velocity Venture Capital. Welcome, everyone. Before we get started talking about solutions, let's talk about how we got here. Ryan, tell us where we're at today.
Sure. Well, back in the early 2000s, we saw tremendous growth in the Sacramento region's economy, leading up to a peak of about 970,000 jobs on payrolls in the Sacramento region in the summer of 2007. Since then, we've lost 130,000 jobs here in the Sacramento region, putting us in a tremendously deep hole and resetting us back to the level that we were in the year 2000. In fact, we're one of the worst performing economies in the state of California right now. We just haven't really recovered. We've got an animated map put together by a group out of Austin called TIP Strategies that shows nationally the job growth starting in 2004 and moving all the way through our current situation right now. And if you keep your eye on the Sacramento region, as it's moving along, you can see the tremendous growth in Sacramento leading up to our economic peak. But when we start to get toward the recession in the latter parts, when all the red dots go away, what's left on the map is a number of green dots, which are all the other regions in the country that have recovered, with very few red dots remaining, meaning those are the regions that are still losing jobs on an annual basis. If you notice, the Sacramento area is one of the few that's remaining on the map, along with one of our other inland partners in the state of California, the Riverside San Bernardino area, otherwise known as the Inland Empire.
And to what do you ascribe the continued lagging of Sacramento as opposed to the rest of the state and the rest of the country?
Sure, I think that when we went through our economic peak, we became very over-concentrated in what have now become unstable sectors. First and foremost, the government sector is a big strain on the region's economy, as you might expect with the current budget situation, not only at the statewide level, but also trickling down to local governments, cities and counties, for instance. We also became over-concentrated in the construction sector, as we were one of the regions in the state that benefited from the continued growth in the inland areas of the state. We saw our construction sector and related sectors like financial activities growing and becoming much more concentrated in Sacramento. But as we've gone through the real estate bust and the housing downturn, and we've seen in-migration and population growth slowing, we're just not seeing the growth in that sector. In fact, most of the loss in the Sacramento region's economy can be attributed to the construction sector, the financial activities sector, and the government sector together.
Well, at the same time all that's happening, there are efforts going on in this region to try and grow native businesses as well as to attract new businesses to this region. Tracy, what's been going on with SACTO and what is it that you're seeing in terms of market trends?
Absolutely. We have continued to be very, very busy at SACTO. SACTO has served as the region's economic development corporation for the last 35 years, and our only charge, Scott, is to go out and work with prospective companies that are looking to set up locations in the six-county region. And I think one of the things that is always amazing to people when we're talking about our prospect activity is that even though we did see a slight downturn in our activity level, that is now peaked back up, and we're starting to see record high levels of activity. And I think that's twofold. I think a lot of that has to do with the price of real estate right now. If you are a prospective company that has wanted to set up a West Coast facility and has been looking at possibly Northern California or anything along the coastal West Coast, you are given a great opportunity to pick up real estate either from a lease perspective or a sale perspective at very, very affordable prices. And I think the other part that where we're seeing a lot of activity is in the international sector. And I think that's also a surprise to people when they understand that, probably anywhere between 25 and 30% of the activity that we're working on right now is in the international sector. Primarily that's based out of Europe, but we're also seeing a very large concentration coming from Korea as well as other Pacific Rim. And so we have a lot of very strong companies that are looking to set up locations, anywhere from a headquarters that would possibly bring 10 jobs to a manufacturing facility that could bring upwards of 500 jobs to this region.
Well, let me ask you a little bit about that. In terms of the types of companies that are looking to locate here, what do you consider to be some of the key attributes that attract people to this region?
It was interesting. I had a company in town, a manufacturer yesterday, that was looking to set up a location in Northern California or possibly Oregon. And I have to say the resounding quality that they're looking for is workforce. And that's one of the areas where the Sacramento region continues to be very, very strong in workforce, our educational system. And it was interesting. They had set up a facility somewhere in the Midwest based on the real estate costs. And it was one of those situations where they were looking at the bottom line, and setting up the facility in the Midwest from a real estate standpoint was much more cost effective for them. But from the labor standpoint, they couldn't get the standard of employee that they needed. And so now they're looking at that facility and trying to decide if they made the right decision.
Wow. Actually, that brings us to Jack. Jack, one of the things that you speak on occasion is about what Sacramento currently possesses, but then you also compare to what it is that we don't possess right now. Give us kind of a snapshot from a venture capitalist perspective as to how Sacramento fares from a business creation and location perspective.
Yeah, I mean, in line with some of the comments that have been made, we've historically been overly concentrated on government and real estate, right? And going forward, in my view, and I think in investors' view in the Sacramento region, we need to reshape our identity from just government real estate and the Kings, and basically expand to embrace technology entrepreneurship. We have the ability as a region to market our operational efficiencies and low cost of labor, but I'm not sure that we want to market that alone. I think we want to complement that with technical centers of excellence in industry sectors where we can grow and thrive and grow from within. So as a complement to some of the activities, business attraction activities of SACTO, I think a concentrated effort by our region to grow new companies, new headquartered companies, and candidly take advantage of the track record of success we have in information technology. Well,
let me interrupt you right there and ask you a question. You talk about a track record of success.
Yeah.
A lot of people wouldn't know what you're talking about. What exactly do you mean?
Well, just to list a couple of the significant exits, a few of the significant exits on the information technology side. Most people understand that Level 1 was acquired by Intel for $2.2 billion. And a lot of engineers spun out of that, and a lot of angel investors who made money growing that company are now investing as second generation entrepreneurs, if you will, into the Sacramento region. OSI was acquired for more than $600 million. More recently, companies like Max Preps was acquired. I mean, there's Serious Magic, Anytime Access, Grass Valley Group. I mean, many of these companies were acquired for $100 million or more. Now you have kind of the next generation of stars that are starting to rise, and you have effectively companies like Raging Wire that are expanding with a $170 million expansion project on their data center. You have a company called ClickNation that just raised $50 million. And then you have the kind of the companies that have been around for a little bit growing, starting to do some interesting things. Synergex has grown and grown quite rapidly, and now launched Synergex Ventures and invested some of their profits into Clean World Partners, a clean tech company. So you have capital, expertise, technologists coming out of a proven track record on the information technology side, now getting engaged in the clean tech efforts here locally and in the medical device efforts here locally.
But isn't it also true that on a comparative basis, we don't have the same breadth and depth of venture capital in order to both house and grow our technology companies, and there are consequences to that. Can you speak a little bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, part of the opportunity that my firm is trying to take advantage of is the fact that this region is so undercapitalized but technology rich.
Give us a comparison.
If you were to compare this region to Denver or San Diego, Denver and San Diego get between 2 and 4% of all U.S. venture capital invested into those regions. They have roughly, from the standpoint of number of filed patents, number of graduating engineers, all the technology metrics that you'd look at with regard to a technology ecosystem, they're comparable to Sacramento. They get 2 to 4% of all U.S. venture capital invested into their regions. We get 0.2%.
0.2%.
0.2%. So there is a gap of seed capital for entrepreneurs. So what ends up happening, the consequence of that, is that companies like Engine Yard, 4 people, really interesting company, cool technology company, ends up getting a term sheet from Benchmark, one of the top tier firms on the planet, for I think a $3 million, $5 million term sheet. But one of the requirements of that term sheet is that you got to move within 30 miles of our office in the Silicon Valley. We, as a Sacramento region, are playing a great support role for the Bay Area in building some valuable companies.
So you're essentially saying that we're losing companies to the Silicon Valley?
We are.
Because of venture capital.
We have amazing engineers here. We have Intel with 6,000 employees here. We have some incredible MBA programs here. These entrepreneurs and these engineers are migrating to the Silicon Valley because of capital and historically management talent. Over the last few years, more of that management talent's migrated up to the Sacramento area in regions like El Dorado Hills and Granite Bay. So now we have the management talent. And what we're hoping to do is start to show a track record of success of seed stage investments into this region. And it's so undercapitalized. We want others to participate. It's not a competitive element. There's an opportunity to co-invest, excuse me, and support these technology companies and help them grow. So we have new headquartered companies here.
Now it's interesting because we're actually losing companies to the Silicon Valley because we don't have the venture capital base here. What we always tend to hear about is that we're losing them to Austin. Can anybody speak on that issue?
Yeah, I think I can. I think in regards to you, from a media standpoint, you always see that there's a mass exodus from California and that it's a very tough place to do business. I think from that standpoint, doing business in California is obviously very possible as well as very profitable, and that means in Sacramento as well. I mean, there are over 3 million businesses in the state of California. And I think when you look at those numbers, you know, we're the 8th largest economy in the world as a state. Anything that you look at from just a sheer number standpoint is going to look massive comparatively to anybody else. And so if you look at the numbers, the number of businesses that are leaving the state of California, it's really less than 5% of the businesses that are located in the state actually eventually leave. And so Austin, you know, it's a great community. Do we compete with them when we're recruiting companies? Absolutely, but I would tell you that Austin is really the only city within the state of Texas that we see on a regular basis. Really? And that has to do with their educational system and their workforce, like we talked about earlier. It doesn't necessarily have to do with the state of Texas incenting these companies with cash infusions. Is it hard to compete against? Absolutely, but at the end of the day, companies that want to service the California market and be part of all of the entrepreneurship that's taking place here and all of the exciting things from a policy standpoint, being in Sacramento, being in California is very important to these companies.
Ryan, another piece of the pie when we're talking about creating economic competitiveness and generating the recovery is how much research happens. How do we compare to other parts of the country with regards to the research dollars that come into the region?
Well, I think the easiest thing to track is looking at research dollars into our public university systems through federal funding. UC Davis does quite well, has been in the past few years at the top of the list of funding across a number of different indicators. Sac State receives a decent share of funding as well. So when you look at that, it appears that there's a lot of research going on and that Sacramento stacks up really well. It's the next stage in economic development that's very important is getting those ideas and research into the marketplace. Innovation and creating new value in the marketplace and keeping that value here and growing it here is exactly what Jack was talking about in the ecosystem that we need to develop in order to have that emerging technology sector grow in Sacramento.
So compared to like an East Coast major research university and the like, we actually do stack up fairly well?
Absolutely. I think, was it last year or the year before, we actually had more research dollars that went into UC Davis than MIT received.
Really?
Absolutely. And see, that's one of those factors that we want everybody in this region to know. And if we can share that information and talk about the positive highlights that are taking place in this region rather than focusing on the negative, that will help this region get to the next level tremendously.
What does that fact mean to investors, Jack?
It's huge. It means as you work to transform innovation into enterprise, you're starting with arguably a world-class research facility. I think the number was $565 million, so not only larger than MIT, but larger than Berkeley. So you think about the number of companies that have spun out of Berkeley and MIT. It's an extraordinary number of companies, but in an effort to transform innovation into enterprise, you need management talent and capital. And there's certainly SACTO is bringing greater awareness to what's going on here in Sacramento. SARTA is also doing a great job, the Sacramento Area Regional Technology Alliance. And then there's groups that are actively investing in seed stage companies like the Sacramento Angels. We just need every Sacramento Angel to get a buddy to grow that group.
Right.
And we need other angel groups to pop up, and clearly we need other corporate groups to start investing in seed and early stage companies in this region. I think we need philosophically to begin to embrace risk at a greater level than we have in the past.
What do you mean by that, Jack?
I mean, being concentrated on government and real estate can make you pretty conservative.
In this market, for sure.
There's ways to and you know, arguably the real estate asset class has been fairly risky over the last number of years. I think we need to look at regional diversification of our economy and look at how much money the real estate developers in Silicon Valley and Boston made by investing in seed and early stage tech companies. I mean, they did extraordinarily well. There is that opportunity. So free rent is not enough. There's got to be free rent plus capital for some of these seed stage entrepreneurs. And you know what? Not all of them are going to win. Some of them are going to fail, but we as a region need to make sure that we learn from those failures. And just like in the Silicon Valley and in Boston, they get recycled into the next generation of winners.
Right. Ryan, where do the opportunities exist? What's the low-hanging fruit for us to pursue in that regional diversification that Jack's speaking to?
Yeah, well, I think what Jack mentioned earlier is exactly the kind of industry that would fit well in Sacramento. Clean energy technology is a great example of an up-and-coming industry sector in the Sacramento region. It's small right now, but arguably it can grow significantly more in the coming years. In fact, over the past 10 years, that particular industry sector in the Sacramento region doubled in size, both in terms of the number of companies here and the number of jobs supported by those companies. Other examples are just the general broader sense of high-tech companies in the Sacramento region. Then you've got other things like healthcare and the related industry sectors that go along with it.
Let's focus on that one for a second. Healthcare, it's been said, is much like a ecosystem that is waiting to turn into an entire environment. If you were to think about this from a real estate perspective, in the healthcare industry here in town, we have billions of dollars of infrastructure investment. And if you were to think of us as a shopping mall, you've got as anchor tenants UC Davis, Sutter, Mercy, Kaiser. We have a tremendous amount of healthcare investment. So how do we fill in the boutiques in terms of the medical device manufacturers, the biotech firms and the like? What is it that we should be doing as a region from a collective leadership standpoint in order, whether it's in healthcare or in clean tech, to make sure that ecosystem is well fertilized?
I think from the clean technology standpoint, I think we have to create opportunities and policies that are very welcoming for them. I think we as a region need to embrace the opportunities that these companies are bringing in terms of their expertise. I just attended a conference in Munich that was 75,000 people and over 2 million square feet of exhibit space concentrated primarily on solar and solar thermal. And I think, you know, for people that think that the clean technology sector is not here to stay and that it's a very limited opportunity for this region, they're wrong. I think when you look at the technology and the advancements that have been made in Europe, we can bring those things to this region. We just need to be able to create an environment that allows them to come here and be successful and create the policies that will enable them to invest in Sacramento.
Jack, I want to speak to this. What does the next generation of Sacramento's economy look like, and What things have to come together in order to support that?
Yeah, and sort of thinking of Sacramento 2.0, right?
Okay.
You know, what is the next wave of activity look like in Sacramento? Right now, we have more than 120 clean technology companies in the Sacramento region.
Wow.
Right now, we have more than 100 medical device companies in that region, and I think that everyone has a role to play in helping to grow those companies.
We'll assign some.
If you're if you're a city or county, you can be a customer, right? If you're a real estate developer, you can provide space and make a small investment that could really take that company to a key milestone that allows them to get funding and actually add employees, which means that the size of the amount of office space is going to grow. If you're an MBA that just graduated, I'm teaching a class on venture capital and entrepreneurship for the University of Pacific's business program, and the MBAs really want to stay here in Sacramento, but the job offers are coming from the cool companies in the Bay Area and the LA area, and what I'm trying to showcase to them is, hey, there's a lot of interesting companies here, and some of them are now taking internships for a quarter or two while they look around for jobs, and those internships may turn into full-time roles. So universities can make time available for their professors. At MIT, the professors there can take effectively a sabbatical to go work and support a company for 6 months or a year. We need to embrace those types of programs. So the point is, these two industry sectors are very relevant to every key stakeholder in the sort of ecosystem here in Sacramento. And so as a complement to what we're doing on the business attraction standpoint, if we understand the roles that we can play in advancing and growing these companies, the beneficiary is going to be us, not only from a high-value job standpoint and a more diversified economy, but from a philanthropic standpoint. Companies that are headquartered here give more. And so the whole community ends up arising when we can support, I think, the 225 companies that we've identified that can really have a chance to go to the next level.
And I think in terms of, just complementing what Jack said, I mean, it is so difficult to actually locate a headquarters. People have no idea what it takes to actually go through and locate, have a headquarters change their locale and come to Sacramento. So if we can work in tandem, all of the things you just talked about are exactly the kinds of support that I was talking about. Giving us the opportunity to keep some of this educational talent in this region. Being able to provide the opportunities from a real estate perspective. We're competing against, Emeryville and some of the areas in the Bay Area that have fabulous flex space available to them. It would be very, very difficult for us from a real estate perspective to compete with them because the space is already built and it's much more cost effective than it would be for one of our real estate developers to build, as you would know, Scott. That's not an easy product to build. So I think just kind of getting outside of our normal way of thinking and thinking a little bit outside of the box in terms of how can we as a community and how can you as an individual impact what's happening and where we can take Sacramento to the next level.
Ryan, what are we missing here in terms of the key catalysts for generating the recovery, a sustainable one that's not so susceptible to the changes, just fluctuations in economic circumstance? Are there any other industries or sectors that we need to be supporting right now?
Yeah, I think, Jack mentioned a concept called high-value companies, and those are the kind of companies that are really the focus of economic development. It's those companies that bring new wealth into the area and that create opportunities for growth in other sectors that in turn recycle that money. For instance, a major high-technology firm headquarters will grow in the region, and as Tracy mentioned, it's very unlikely that they'll leave. And as that grows, it brings in more employees who spend more money in retail and buy houses and go to healthcare facilities. So thinking about those types of companies that are the high value, or in other terms, economists call them the base industry sectors, those are the exact kind of things that we need to be concentrating on, because we have been so dependent on what the other sectors are, those that are really demographically driven by population growth and not feeding our economic base. So, high tech, clean energy technology, biotechnology, even healthcare to a certain extent are exactly the kind of sectors that we're looking at that can grow in the region, and that if we put more effort toward, not only in terms of growing new companies and attracting other companies, but keeping those companies here by having concentrated efforts on what their needs are and paying a lot of attention to them, it can really help.
Austin grew Dell, right? They recruited they've been great at recruiting, but they grew Dell in their region, and it's been an extraordinary success story, right? We have companies, some Synapsense and Altergy and Jadoo and Clean World Partners and others that are starting to grow. And 5 years from now, we may be looking at those companies as major headquarters in the clean tech sector. We may find their counterparts on the medical device side. So there's a real opportunity regionally. We have all the ingredients. We just need to get a little bit more coordinated and embrace risk just a little bit more.
Let's in closing, I want to talk about a different form of venture capital. And that is, we have to have things for people to do. There's a new project called the Generosity Project that talks about venture philanthropy. And in our closing moments, can you all speak to that project and what that means? Because that's a quality of life issue for the people we're both trying to retain and attract.
Sure. I can speak to it. It's actually a project that we did a little bit of work on. We had found over the years that philanthropic giving in the Sacramento region had been lower than other comparative areas. This kind of was a genesis out of that concept and really trying to look at it and what we do about it. We in fact found that we're significantly below the national average in not only the number of people that give as a proportional basis to our population, but also the amount that they give when they do give. And if we just undertake some efforts, which are part of the Generosity Project, to get more people involved, to get people who are already giving to give more, we can see a tremendous impact on our local nonprofit sector, which, as the government sector is declining, has a role in providing basic services in addition to a number of other community benefits.
Right. Well, that's our show for today. I'd like to thank our guests, Tracy Schall, Ryan Sharp, and Jack Crawford. There's lots of talk on television, but few places where you can be part of the conversations that matter. I'm Scott Syfax, and you've been watching Studio Sacramento. Join us next time right here on KVIE.
I'm James Beckwith, President and CEO of Five Star Bank. As a community bank, we believe that open dialogue about the issues affecting our region is vitally important. From the economy to the environment to social issues, we look forward to the conversations and hope you'll join in.